Well, welcome everyone to Blooducation Baristas. We are your hosts, Daniela Hermelin and Monica Pagano, offering you piping hot transfusion news. These episodes are brought to you by transfusionnews.com, so please make sure you subscribe to the Transfusion News question of the day. Here's Monica.
Hola Daniela, hola a todos. Gracias a la comunidad hispana por unirse a este nuevo episodio de Baristas. Hoy vamos a tener unos excelentes invitados para hablar todo sobre lo que es el laboratorio clínico. Daniela.
Gracias, Monica. You know, we're so excited to be here today to talk about such an important topic, and that's laboratory advocacy. Personally, the lab to me is the best place in the hospital. And, you know, the lab is what provides the results. The result is what provides the diagnosis, and you can't have a diagnosis to help treat the patient. And we all know this, and I'm hoping others on the call, you know, whether you're working in the lab or you're on the ICU floors, we all know the importance of the lab. But we've also been struggling in the laboratory and the challenges we've been facing in the laboratory, supporting the staff and recruiting the next generation. So we're here today to meet with some of our master lab educators, some people in our world that we consider our heroes, to talk about some of these challenges. And so I'm proud to bring together these individuals. And Monica, please go ahead and introduce our speakers today.
Thank you, Daniela. As you said, here today we have 3 leaders in laboratory medicine, and they are Max Luzon, who is the director of the undergraduate program in medical laboratory science at the University of Washington in Seattle, where he is also an assistant teaching professor. We also have Nina Sen, who is the blood bank transfusion service manager at the University of Washington with more than 20 years of experience. Nina has been extremely active at the national level as an AABB assessor since 2014, and she has also been working on the AABB blood bank and transfusion services standards and accreditation committees. And last but not least, we have Sue Johnson, who is the Director of Clinical Education and the specialist in blood bank program at Advocacy. She is also the Director of the Transfusion Medicine program at Marquette University and a clinical associate professor at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, College of Health Science. She's also the chair of the American Society of Clinical Pathology Board of Certification Nomenclature Task Force since 2019.
Wow.
Daniela.
Thanks so much for being here today. I think everyone always loves getting started by hearing each other's journey. And if you don't mind, Nina, we're going to start with you. If you could share with us how you got involved in the field, who inspired you, or did you stumble upon medical laboratory science? Can you share a little bit with us?
Sure. Yes, it was more of a stumble upon story. And my background is I was not born in this country, so I did migrate 20 plus years ago. At that time, I had graduated high school in a foreign country. And so when I came here, my next step would have been going to college. And so what's different about that is that, you know, the opportunities that are out there, it's kind of hard to ascertain what's available and what's not. And so I had vaguely heard about the medical laboratory technician as somebody who had worked in the hospital in a clinical laboratory setting. And obviously, I was somebody who liked science a lot. So I like a lot of chemistry, everything science related. And so I decided to do this journey as a MLT, so medical laboratory technician at a local community college. It was affordable, it was easy to get into, and it was something that was doable. In 2.5 years, I'd graduate and I'd have a job. And so that worked out really well. Obviously, with these clinical rotations, that was a very good opportunity at the hospital that I had rotated at. Liked my work and wanted to hire me, and so I joined them. Obviously, the journey as an MLT does not stop there. So next path would have been, completing my degree in bachelor's in science. So I did that in micro and molecular biology and just continued on with that. And then I had to move. And so that move elicited me finding another job up in Seattle. And at that time, Seattle Harborview Medical Center was opening a new transfusion service blood bank. And if you're not familiar with Seattle, blood bankers are hard to find over here. And so at that time, it was even more difficult. And so I got lucky to be accepted the position as a technologist in the lab, and joined Harborview. And from there on, within a few years, the opportunity to do the specialist in blood bank came along. And so we continued with that journey, and blood bank is what I do now. It certainly did not start that way, and I enjoy the complexity of it, and we just keep on with it.
Wow, I love that story and that journey, because it really shows how the sky's the limit in the laboratory, and you don't even know what kind of opportunities exist. It's so multi-layered as well. As you described your journey, what were some of the challenges you did face, though, as you went through it?
Yes, what I do very vividly recall very early in the career is just not having a lot of information about what's possible, certainly like in SBB or the different specialist pathways. Folks that are 1 or 2 years into their career really don't know a lot about that. And then also generalist versus specialist. I had joined as a generalist into a laboratory. I liked chemistry, and so that was what I was kind of doing, but I was really good at immunohematology. And so just knowing the different pathways where something maybe not as prevalent and not being talked about as much. And so a lot of folks, when they start this journey, they're really thinking about their schedule, where they're working, what their pays are. And so that next level of opportunity that's available sometimes isn't very prevalent or encouraged sometimes as well. So I think that was maybe the challenge. Obviously, it's picking back onto something that you are wanting as a career initially to pay your bills, right? So that's kind of the main goal. And so then the next term, how do you grow this into something that becomes what you want to go to work every day? Those type of things, I think, was not there for me. Obviously came later, which was great. But it was just really just working as a medical laboratory scientist.
Thank you, Nina. That's pretty amazing career that you have made in such a relative short time, because I know that you started as a CLT about 15 years ago, now you're a manager. So that's quite remarkable. So let's continue with Sue. So similar to the question that we have for Nina, looking back at your educational pathway, what was your motivation, and were there any specific courses or experiences that kind of motivated or shape your career in medical laboratory profession?
Yeah, so unlike Nina, I actually ended up majoring in those days medical technology. Now it's medical laboratory science. And I was actually directed there by my mom, of all people. And I don't even know how she knew this, right? But she knew that I was interested in science. I wanted to be in healthcare. I knew I did not want to be a nurse. And it wasn't my personality. And, unfortunately, now I look back and think how dumb, but I didn't think I was smart enough to be a doctor. So she said, hey, try this. So I didn't really know what it was. Started it, had an amazing instructor in blood bank who sparked the light, right, for me, the fire in blood banking, immunohematology. And I knew that's where I wanted to be. So when I graduated, I was only looking at blood banking kind of positions. So I didn't hesitate at all. Not like Nina, I did not like chemistry, like at all. Micro is, so I knew this is where I wanted to be. And then as far as like what really was additional sparks for me right on is a huge impact was starting in the SPB program, the Specialist in Blood Banking program. And I did that early in my career. I was only out of school about 3 years, and my undergrad. And again, it was just like, that's where I knew I wanted. And that just opened up so many doors for me, having that opportunity. And so, I mean, that just kind of, was this, again, the second spark, right, to get things moving. And from there, it really has been being involved with my professional societies, right, our professional societies, right, starting with our state association, the Wisconsin Association of Blood Banks, getting opportunities there to meet people and talk to people, and then, giving first presentation, for example, right? And that's something you can do at any point in your career, whether you're young, right, just out of school, or been in it for a while, right? It's a great opportunity. And then from there, just went right, ABB and the board of certification, and like tons of opportunities, right, from there on.
Well, thanks for sharing that. You already are giving away some ways we can get involved. I love that your mom, inspired you and had that insight to you, and knowing that this would be, and I keep that in my heart all the time, Sue. Max, did you also stumble upon the field?
Yes, I did. So I went into undergrad as just your basic biology major. I knew I loved science, but I had no idea what I was going to do. And I happened to stumble on an elective taught by one of my early career mentors, Dr. Kathy Doig, who was teaching a hematology course. And I happened to con her into letting me take it as an elective, because I just thought the idea of looking at blood was interesting. Well, from there, it was a combination of falling in love with the content, but also Kathy Doig was very approachable about the field. And so there was this kind of ability of hers just to answer questions. She made herself available. And then I decided to take another course of hers, just because I was I really responded well to her teaching and I wanted to continue working with her. One thing led to another, and soon I changed my major because she was the head of the, I think it was called, biomedical science is what it was called. Biomedical laboratory science. So I ended up changing my major. And changed my major, started doing classwork in that. I loved it, but I didn't know what I wanted until I started moving into my internship phase of my career. And at that point, I did my rotation in a blood bank at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. And I fell in love with blood bank there. It was actually the hands-on application that pulled me in more than the theory of lecture. I just liked the way it flowed. I liked the teamwork, the camaraderie that I really felt blood bank had there. So I ended up following into transfusion medicine. So actually my first job was in the microbiology lab though, because that was what was hiring. Worked there for a year and a half. It was a great experience, but my transfusion really got under my skin and I really wanted to join that. So I ended up taking a position out in Seattle with Nina to work at Harborview in transfusion. One thing led to another. I moved up the ladder. Also, as Sue was talking, getting more involved with different organizations, AABB, ASCP, taking on more and more. My managers would come to me and say, hey, we need someone to do a project. I would say yes. Took on more and more work, started doing a little more teaching on the side. And next thing you know, I'm teaching full time.
Thank you, Max. I think listening the three of you, I see a common denominator, right? I see young people, not sure what they want, but they know they like science, they like health, they like something, and then they look for opportunities, right? I see a common denominator within the three of you. But Nina, now, in your thoughts, with all the years of experience working in the lab with so many, people in the lab, do you think, are there specific skills or qualities you think are kind of essential? I mean, relatively essential to be part of this team, to move forward, to develop a career in the medical laboratory profession?
Yes, and there are many, but maybe one of the things is I talk to people, new hires that come in, or people that are prospective hires, or just talking to staff in the lab that have been there maybe 1 year and upwards of 10 years. There are some things that are probably more important than others, but one of the things was, working in a medical laboratory profession like this, you're certainly hidden. And so, you don't go into this profession that your name's going to be in the front paper. You get to be, out there to see people. So this is really a service to patients. So you have to like that type of job that you are doing, first of all. But skills, things that I would, as a blood banker, that worked well for me was attention to detail, really having that big attention to detail and following standard processes, right? So having those, doing the same testing the same way every time, because blood bank has a aspect to it that's manual. And so that hasn't gone over the years. You still have to do manual testing. And so doing things the same way every time. Obviously, it's a team environment, so it requires being able to work together in teams, being able to work together with other folks in the laboratory across different spectrums as well. So having that communication is going to be important as well for us to be able to succeed in the laboratory field. So those are some of the key ones that kind of come to mind. Obviously, there's a lot other ones too, but to me, those are the key things. One of the other ones that are lately in the last few years with the pandemic, given folks haven't had that maybe structured medical laboratory science program behind them, or they missed a rotation because of the pandemic as things were shut down. I think inequality. The laboratory has to produce work that is meets the standards. And so trying to teach and advocate for quality, that there's a set of quality standards that have to be followed, and that staff are adhering to that and knowing what that is. Because if you don't really have that core background of maintaining quality, then your laboratory becomes suspect in making sure, are you turning out what you're supposed to turn out, right? So I think that's been some of the things that we really like to see be encouraged and paying attention to for medical laboratory scientists.
I love that. And that probably, I can feel Sue's wheels turning when she hears that, and thinking about how do we add that to even more at the basic learner, maybe starting early. And I agree with that, because even on the blood center side, when employees are started, we start with a culture of quality. Maybe some of you are not used to this, and we're going to teach you about it. Some of you naturally have this type of personality where you like to do things in the right way, right? I was not born with that personality. I had to train myself to become that way. But I think you're right. It's a really important element. I wanted to go back to this word, though, stumbled. And, that whenever I meet laboratory medical scientists, I think for the most part, people do stumble into this field. But when we talk about, bringing in this next generation, how do we keep them from stumbling? And are there changes that are happening where we can, create more awareness? But I still feel like people are stumbling into our field. Also, I don't really like when this happens, but we're starting to compare this generation to this generation, and this generation likes to work this way, this generation likes to baby boomers, millennials, whatever. Should we, though, be thinking about this? And how do we, use those differences or not in recruiting the next generation? How do we get rid of the stumbling? Who wants to answer that? Max wants to answer.
I can chime in a little bit. So as the education program at the University of Washington, we spend a lot of our time in recruitment and just advertising the program. I have a great manager of student services, Heather, who's always out there getting in front of high school students, getting in front of college students, telling them, hey, this exists as a profession. I speak on college panels. I have my staff speaking on college panels just to inform them at the biology levels, the chemistry levels, hey, this is a thing. Very often, I think one of the things that comes up is when people want to be in the healthcare professions, they think doctor, they think nurse. These have a great media prevalence where they're just portrayed. They have whole shows, Grey's Anatomy, ER, all these shows. The closest for medical lab science is CSI, this like dimly lit criminal forensics lab. And so very often that's what people's perception is of the lab. Don't get me wrong, forensic scientists, great. It's a great offshoot, or not even an offshoot, a great career path for people trained in lab sciences. But it's only one piece. There's the clinical labs, there's surveillance labs, there's state labs. All of this is available. So I think one of the things is this big push for just recruitment, informing the general public this is a thing. One of the silver linings of COVID was there was whole newspaper articles about lab testing. I think that laid a foundation. We have to capitalize on it and continue making it front and center that this is occurring. The other part on the education side is it's expensive. A lot of people interested in the lab sciences, and Nina talked on this, is they're expensive to go get a degree. So we need to take a hard look at maybe we can find and fund scholarships to get this next generation in. A lot of the younger generation are very concerned about the expenses associated with getting a degree, whether that's an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. And I think as a profession, we need to think about how do we want to fund this and get people in the lab.
Can I just add that, Max, I love what you said. It's so much is recruiting. The other thing I think is we need to be better at getting to the moms. We need to get to the middle school, the families, right? Like the parents that, not just the moms, but I'm biased, of course. But getting to the parents, right, that are encouraging their kids. They know their kids, right? Like, and I actually always ask my undergrad MLS class, how did you get into this, just to see? And it's changed over the years. It used to be a lot of stumbling. It's not as much now, but because I think we are doing better at promoting, but we got to keep going. But in my last class I had 4 or 5 of the students out of 19 that said it was their moms that guided them. And I'm like, all right, there we go. We have to get to like the guidance counselors, the middle schools, the high schools, like they need to know about our profession, right? Like that's huge. It's huge.
And how did those moms learn about it?
Some of them, good question. Some of them were in the medical profession. So nurses, physical therapists, you know, other allied health kind of professions, right, that return that. And so they knew about medical lab science. And then they knew their kids, right, like, and what their interests are. Like a lot, they love science, right, but they don't want to be the typical, right, is that they're more introverted. And they'd rather stay in the lab and do their thing, right, and do the science.
Yeah, I cannot agree more with you in terms of going to the families, because aunts and uncles are also very important. I'm trying to convince my nephew to go to the Red Cross as well to do some laboratory sciences. So across the world, I mean, you can do that across the world. It's not only in the United States. There are different groups. The Red Cross, it is present in many different countries, and you can get your certification there. So there are different programs. Definitely you can go and start Googling, you know, medical laboratory scientists in your language, and you will find how you can be trained on this. So following up with this idea of promoting and what Daniela was mentioning in terms of differences in generations, right? And how we approach science or problems or, different goals for everyone and commitment and so on. I wonder if the three of you, right, that have so many years of experience in the field have seen any changes, either before the pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic, in terms of, career goals or the laboratory in general, if there has been substantial challenges and changes.
I'll start, I guess. I fortunately am not having to hire into the laboratories right now, right? I know it's a huge struggle, right? Everybody has vacancies. So that's number one, right? And I think our graduates have so many opportunities, right? They can decide where they want to go, where they want to go. They almost even can decide on shift. I mean, it used to be automatically like, you'd graduate and you'd probably have to work off shift. Now some of them can find first shift, day shift hours. So that's a challenge. And everybody's looking at other opportunities, right, for individuals. And it is opening the field because other individuals are being able to come in to it, but they still need the education and the training and ideally certification, right, to have high quality testing in our labs. Nina, how about you? I bet you have some challenges.
Yes. They almost brought me to tears over the last few years of the pandemic with the staffing challenges. I think in comparison, what I can vividly say is, when I had joined as a medical laboratory scientist and, the first few years of my career, the thought of moving up the ladder or out of the job or doing something different wasn't really prevalent for me. And I could say maybe in general, I could see that be true about most folks, unless they had to move, they sort of stayed in the position and wanted to get seniority. The term seniority was more prevalent at that time. But as a manager, I've seen, the new recruits we get, folks that come out of the program, within a few years, that urge to do something else or take on a different, whether it's a master's or an SBB, or just doing something different than what they have done. I've seen a lot more of that. So that shift also kind of, for me as a manager, shifting my thinking when I engage with folks that are new hires to my lab or prospective hires. You do the first year of training and you get comfortable with this. And then the second year, starting to think, what do you add to that next layer or what you have already done? Because I can see that need in them. I have staff that will come and ask me, or we do evaluations and we kind of have conversations about career path. And so that seems to have escalated. Folks really are not staying in the same position. And so it is challenging for a lot of organizations to retain folks. And obviously pay is a thing that has come across the spectrum, having pay. And we saw a lot where people were doing traveler jobs over the last few years and not necessarily staying on a permanent FTE. And so that really changes the dynamic as well. And so there was just things like that I think we're just needing to adapt to that now. I can expect if I have a new hire. And a lot of these folks, to be honest, they're very smart. Would I expect somebody to be in the same position, doing the same job for more than a few years? Probably not. I think it's realistic that in today's environment, we're expecting folks to move. And so with that, I would encourage those folks to move something that they can build on. And so working with them that way and hoping that, as we get new folks in, those folks come in wanting to work in laboratory science. And with that, there might be folks that would want to stay as a career as an SBB. But yes, it is certainly a challenge, but we do the best we can trying to maintain that balance of advocating for people for their careers, but also retaining your FTE in lab so you can perform laboratory work as well.
Well, thank you, Nina, for sharing that. what we've been experiencing in the last 3 years. And we could just take a pause for those that are listening and have had some struggles. And it's been challenging. I know the feeling of wondering if, you could just survive today. And I love when Max said, I fell in love, right? But sometimes we're in the lab and we can't be in that dreamlight state. We're just in that state of survival. And all of us have kind of gone up and down. We've dealt with people leaving the lab during COVID or even in the last year or now. What would be your advice to those right now who are struggling to support the lab? What would you say to them right now? Because it's hard. And there are people that are struggling right now. Some of them are managers that are trying to keep the morale. And some of them are, more of the bench tech who are taking a brunt of the work. So what do we do right now to give advice, both on an operational level and on an emotional level?
To me, I think it's taking the small moments. That's something else I had to teach myself as well. You're not looking for that end goal that is going to be everything's in perfect state. So the small moments are going to be important. And sometimes a small moment is that happiness you get when you care for a patient and they make it through surgery and you've given them 100 units of blood. You have done something to save someone's life. It is an unseen thing. So a lot of times you're having to pat yourself on the back, right? So those small moments are going to be really important. Appreciating your colleagues and encouraging each other, being there for each other. Folks have been nice about, covering training or, if someone needed a weekend break or someone wanted, because they had something going on. One of the things as I got towards, we were in a better spot to be able to give ourselves some break was just really, in the past where I wouldn't have maybe given somebody more than a few weeks of break, was giving them a little longer break as people were trying to get to go international and visit their families they hadn't seen for years. And so just being a little bit more lenient as a manager that people could go and do that and reconnect that way. And, figuring out in the lab how to maintain the balance while someone was gone for a long time, can be challenging. But to me, it seemed like I had to do it because that was just maintaining that positive environment, but also some semblance of normalcy for people to connect with others outside of the lab, right? So those were the small moments I would say, just not looking for that big goal. Sometimes that big goal never really comes, you just keep working towards it. So it's important to just maybe reflect back on what are the small achievements or small timeouts you can take. I know we as a team at Montlake Transfusion, we've taken some of that small moments over the last year, whether it's been gone out and done a yoga thing together out in the sunshine for an afternoon, or just joined the team spirit of the university and did an activity. So those were nice things to just disconnect for a little bit and then come back feeling a little refreshed.
Yoga sounds nice. I know the languages of love. I know bringing food always may help the situation. It touches upon all love languages, but yoga is a nice one. Thanks for sharing those insights. I feel like Max was going to say something, or
yeah, I can just echoing what Nina said though. I also encourage quite a bit with students of reflection on self-care. In deciding where can I actually do. I regularly tell students, I'm like, that 4.0 might not be achievable based on everything in your life. You are balancing being a full-time student, working, family obligations, and it's okay to let go of that goal of perfection. Let go of that and say, you know what, I'm going to strive. A 3.5 is an amazing achievement considering everything I'm doing. A 3.5 alone is an amazing achievement. You did great. You showed mastery of the concept. So I regularly counsel people, like, figure out what you can do and do not neglect that self-care. Make sure you're getting your 8 hours of sleep. Make sure you're eating a decent meal. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. So figuring out what you can do to help the lab, and then also drawing a line. You don't need to pick up every overtime shift. Pick up what you can, but then also leave time for yourself, your family, and your other obligations, and your other things that give you joy and happiness. So I think somewhere along the line with COVID, we just kind of normalized for ourselves giving up all this bit because we're doing our best to keep the lab going. Self-care fell on the wayside. I regularly tell people it's time to bring it back up and engage in that self-care, whether that's yoga at lunch, eating a nice meal, not taking that 5th overtime shift, and instead walking the dog and spending time with your loved ones.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. So yeah, please.
Yeah, Max, that's great. Absolutely. And I think even that self-awareness piece, right? Because we're all so into the science and the learning and helping people. And it's like, well, wait a minute, what are you committed to, right? And what are you really committed to? You know, if we're in the field, we're committed to patient care, right? And doing the best we can, right, for our patients and whatever it is. And maybe it is we need to take a break, right? We need to slow down. We don't have to pick up every shift. I totally agree with that. And as a supervisor, manager, new into being a, supervisor, manager, having that awareness for yourself is also huge. And, it's not always been talked about. Look, I'm really happy. It is a lot more now, right? And that kind of learning is much more prevalent because it really does help just balance things, right, for yourself and the people around you. Absolutely. The other thing I would say, and I'm going to say it again, I already said it, but volunteering or, just being involved. I mean, volunteer for a little project, a validation. I know everybody always needs help with those things, and it just gets you out of doing the usual, right? Like you get an opportunity, and if you're part of your state society or, ASCLS, whatever it is, right? It's just an opportunity to talk to different people. And I think it's huge for individuals that decide to take that little extra step, right? And I just think that for me personally, it was huge to just keep me going. And the point in my career when I was starting to feel like, oh my God, I can't take another, person's leaving, or I have to train another person or whatever. But when you have that outside interaction and you find out, oh, it's like that for other people, or hey, they have this approach or whatever it is, right? Like, it's super helpful, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Nina, Sue, and Max. I think the three of you kind of very nice in different ways put together some ideas about how to, overcome some of the obstacles that we have. And the idea of, as Nina was saying, small things, right? And also as Sue and Max, small things that you can accomplish, a small validation, a small something that gives you, is rewarding. In addition to what Nina was saying, there is nothing more rewarding when you have a OB bleed and the patient makes it, right? And the entire lab work together to support that patient. I always, as someone said before, Nina said before, and also Daniela, the lab is kind of the silent hero, and it's silenced because nobody knows how the laboratory scientists run, to get blood for patients, run within the lab to do the testing, to get the units ready, to do everything that they have to do to make sure that the blood arrives safely and at the right time to the right patient. And I always like to say to my colleagues and nurses, when there is a code, we know physicians and nurses run to the patient. Well, laboratory scientists don't run slower than that. They run as fast. So definitely, but it's just hidden. It's not evident. So I guess with that in mind, I wonder if there are any other thoughts that you would like to give, right, to the audience that either are not very familiar still with laboratory scientists, the career, or if they are already aware but they are struggling, what are, like, the 2 or 3 things that you want to make sure that they hear from you based on your experience? What would you tell them?
I think, for folks that have not done this, or they're thinking about it, or don't know what it is, reaching out to your community, whether it's a community health center or, university. University is a good place where you can find out more, and that outreach to know more. I always say to anyone that ever asks me about what it is or they're questionable is, come have a tour of the lab, come have a chat. I'm happy to show you the lab. I'm even happy to have you sit down and watch testing, because sometimes the words don't really connect as well as maybe the actions do. So just, visually seeing something is always a great way to kind of retain that as well. And so, it's a wonderful profession. It's fulfilling if you're able to provide clinical care to patients and also do research. And at the same time, you're not by the bedside. Somebody doesn't like it. This would be the best profession to consider. And there's just so many opportunities to learn, know about, it's a big field. It's a big field, so much to learn, but it is probably a very fulfilling career. There's always a need for medical laboratory scientists. That work is not going to go away. So you'll definitely have job security in that sense for a very, very long time. And so if you're looking for that, and, if you're somebody who has family commitments and you cannot work weekdays 9 to 5, this job certainly has opportunities to do other hours, around the clock, weekends. So there's that type of schedule available as well. I think those are some of the key things that come to my mind.
One thing I like to tell people that are interested in the profession is just how flexible it is. So I did a little mini interest panel with some students who actually thought about MLS and then chose not to come into it. And they chose instead to go with the bio degrees and things like that. And I was asking them why, what's the pull? And they had this perception that the career was very narrow, that you just have to be in the clinical lab, and that's all you're ever going to be. One thing I like to advise is it's the exact kind of opposite of that. You can do so much with an education in lab science. You can be in the clinical lab. You can go into a number of other labs, both public, nonprofit, for-profit, biotech. You can move into hospital administration. There is so much that it allows you to do while giving you so much hands-on experience and a marketable skill as you're approaching some of these times in your life when you are considering other options. You can have a job while you are looking at transitioning and getting your MBA and moving into hospital administration, which allows a lot more breathing room to have that income coming, to be able to have breathing space to decide what you want to do next. So one thing I really like to stress is just how flexible the job can be, especially to younger generations that are approaching things, as Nina said, with okay, I'm going to do this for a couple years and then I'm going to go sort something else out. This allows for that.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you. Great advice. And I think the other thing is, for those of us that are in the profession, I think we need to speak up for ourselves. We need to be, and I'm glad to hear, Monica talk about, talking with her colleagues and outside of the laboratory, right? And we need people to know about who we are, right? For example, the IMMLS campaign that we've done with the Board of Certification and ASCLS, that's all about, right? The nurses have RN on their name tags, right? Everybody knows what that is. But we need to start creating that awareness that MLS is, right? That oh, you're in laboratory science, right? You're in this, right? So I think we need to, and it's hard because a lot of us that, not me, but a lot of us that have gone into this profession are introverted, right? And they want to be behind the scenes, but we need to be out there talking to people, and telling people who we are across all of our, our families, our friends, the guy at the store, whoever it is, right? Like, yeah, and just really speak up.
Yeah, I think that this is a great way to kind of summarize our conversation and actually lead to the final question. So what I think we've heard is there's almost like 4 pillars. We have a recruitment pillar. We have an educational / professional track pillar. We have a lobbying / advocacy pillar. And then the 4th is, I would say, a media. I don't know what we want to call that, but I love just calling it I Am MLS campaign. That kind of falls into advocacy, and all 4 of these do overlap. There's circles that overlap each other. So maybe if we could just finish off by saying, first, I don't think every one of us needs to do all of the pillars. We might feel that we fit into one. Max, I know you love education. Actually, all of you do, but maybe some of you feel more involved in one pillar over the other. Although we probably should have some continuity in language, and be bringing all of these concepts together. But maybe the last pillar, what can we be doing? I actually didn't know about the I Am MLS campaign. How do we harness so many of our organizations or meetings, social media, to bring these things out? And I agree. I think so often we say nursing really speaks for themselves. They have unions, they advocate. We know how important nurses are. They let us know, but we're a little bit more shy, timid in the lab, but we shouldn't be. So if you can give us if each one of you can give us some tangible things to take away today, check this out, belong to this, this is what's happening. So those of us listening on the call can say, oh, that speaks to me. And then after we finish, we do have a few questions from the audience. So, okay, now, if you guys don't mind providing some hardcore things we can wrap our hands around to move on from today's conversation.
Yeah, I can chime in. One of the first things I would say is go when you can get out of the lab. Go serve on hospital committees, go serve on university committees, go serve on national, local committees, and advocate. Let your voice be heard. So often I think lab scientists, as more introverted people, stay in the lab and we're content with that. But I think it's also very important for us to have our voices heard. Individuals like Monica, who's a physician, great advocate for the lab. The lab directors can't do it all, and they shouldn't do it all. They're not. She's an MD. Monica, I adore you. You're not, though, an MLS. So let me come out there too with you and speak and say, this is what's going on with the bench, with the lab. I am an MLS. This is what I do. Let us get out there and be heard and said. So that's one of the things I would really advise people to go out there and do, and get your voices heard. Let the hospital know you exist.
Yeah, and maybe we can lean on Monica to bring people into those committees as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
because sometimes it takes somebody that's already have a chair at the table to say, I'm also going to bring in this individual because it's important to have this person at the table.
Yeah, and I've been lucky to work with Monica and other great physicians who have done exactly that. And it's very important when you realize there's not a voice being heard at the table, you invite it to be heard.
Yeah, one of the things that sometimes I see, like laboratory week. So in April, we have the laboratory week celebrating laboratorians and what they do. But, the hype comes in that week and it's all about laboratorians that week. And then after that, things just slow down and kind of go and become invisible. So that's like 1 week out of the entire year that you're looking at. So just to me, I was really thinking about this yesterday, is just more frequent either celebrations, so, shout outs in the hospital, when I go by the cafeteria, there's a message board and it's got the message and it's highlighting an award for somebody, but just more shout outs that way. And, I wish in a hospital setting, sometimes they would take like a 5-minute pause and kind of give a shout out over the speakers and kind of like, so-and-so who's a medical laboratory scientist, so that maybe the patients that come and their families that come kind of might be curious to know, well, what is that, right? If they've never heard that before. So to me, that kind of just been revolving in my head, that just that visibility tends to come and go in those waves. Similarly with ABB, that ABB week comes and everyone's on board and we meet. And then that all just sort of dissipates then afterwards. And so just taking back to your organizations, just celebrating the laboratory profession more frequently in a way that maybe gets the general audience that's just not healthcare staff, could bring that together and maybe have more questions asked about and curiosity about the career itself. But that's just what's going in my head right now.
No, that's great, because I leave the ABB, I'm on a high, but then it dissipates. How do you take that high? How do you take that wave and bring it in through the whole year? I agree with you.
Yeah, it's great insight. And here's the IMMLS.
I love it.
Have it prevalent, have it strong, right? I would say too, practically speaking, you can go click on, ASCP. If you actually Google IMMLS, you can get to the website pretty easily, but it's on the ASCP BOC part of the website. And just keep talking about it, right? I think that's really important. It's the advocacy and just a little thing. So many people say I'm a tech. Like, we have to quit using that language, right? Like, it's hard. Once in a while, I slip, and I'll be like, but even in class, right? And talking with the kids, the students, I really try hard not to say tech, because what is a tech? A tech is many, many things, right? A scientist sounds way cooler, and that's who we are, right? So I think that's important. And the other thing too is educating the whole healthcare profession, right? Like I've been talking to pathologists a lot, right? And because we work with pathologists, and a lot of them don't know, right? They say tech all the time. It's education. It comes down to that as well. As Monica mentioned, I chair the nomenclature task force, of which Kathy Doig's a member. We have great ASCLS representation on the task force, and we're really working hard to get communications out to all of our professional societies that touch laboratory science, right? And educating about, terminology and nomenclature. That's really important, because I think that's part of why we've had a crisis, right? And because people don't know who we are, because we've had so many names, right? So it's bringing it, at least for medical laboratory science, to one name, right? And then laboratory science as a profession, right? And laboratory science professionals or scientists. So, which you've all been saying today. I love it.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. When I trained, I use the word technologist because that's how it was taught to me. And so it has been probably in the last 10 years of this important conversion. And I am doing my best to change my vernacular. And it is so important. So definitely. And I think the pillar should be called visibility. So we have advocacy, but it's different than visibility. So that's the name of my fourth pillar. Monica, if you don't mind, we have 2 questions from the same person, Karen Wooten-Miller, who, thank you so much for joining, Karen. Karen asked some great questions. She, going back to the question on, education, I wonder if facilities will consider internships to promote opportunities and provide awareness? That was the first question she asked. And are partnerships with technical schools or colleges and universities with lab science programs an option to work as a pipeline within the pipeline? So if anybody can, they kind of meld these two questions. So if anyone could provide some answers to that, that would be great.
I can chime in because I live in the world of building connections with our sites. First off, if you can get affiliated with a hospital, a technical school, a college, do so. If you're not, go reach out to them. If you are currently connected, do as much as you can, whether that involves you giving some tech time for some techs to come over and teach a lecture, be in lab. My students love meeting practicing techs who are right there in the profession. Yes, I am in MLS, but they like the shiny and new people to come over and talk to them. And I am always looking for connections. One of the things that happened with the MLS profession is as we kind of reached a crunch time with staffing, a lot of the sites said they couldn't do teaching anymore. So I lost rotation sites. With fewer rotation sites, I can bring on fewer students, which means I have fewer graduates, which means the hiring issues continue or even get worse. So I am always saying, come out, do what you can, do anything. I'll take any amount of engagement from affiliate sites. Whether, again, they're taking students, always happy to send students for clinical rotations, or whether they just want to donate expired reagents, or have someone come by and give a lecture, or just be in our lab. Every education facility I know is always looking for those connections with anyone to any amount.
I think the on the ASCP website, the pathways to getting certification. So for example, the BB certification, you've got the different routes. And so one of the routes is getting the experience if you have the bachelor's in science degree. That's something that's really helped our organization as we work to adopt that as a policy in hiring in the last year and a half or so. And so that allowed us to bring on folks that had a bachelor's in science degree with no clinical laboratory rotation or experience. And so they worked with us for a year and they challenged the route 2 for the BB certification. I'm happy to say, we've had people be successful in it. So I have folks that are going to take the exam, and we have folks that have taken the exam and they have passed it on their first try with flying colors. So it is possible to do that. And, if you're in a setting where, probably going to the leadership and advocating, if that's not a current pathway that's available, that will open up the field to allow for more recruitment for sure.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know within the hospitals I work for, we did have our first also college BS who, did his clinical rotations. He is sitting for the SBB. But to your point, we have to find a track in terms of salary. What do we call that person? How do we create that job, that place for him? So that does kind of cause some conversation. So we
call ours MLS trainee. So they're MLS
trainee.
And they're trainee status. And once they get their certification and meet the requirements, then they become MLS.
That's great. Thank you.
And we have a term associate scientist until they get their certification.
That's awesome.
Just ideas.
Yeah. Well, we are at the top of the hour, even beyond it. Sue, I think you did want to share something, so I don't want to keep you. Or if there's anything else you guys want to leave us with.
The only thing I'd leave you with is if anyone listening has questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to answer questions, engage in topics on any of this. So don't be afraid to reach out. And you can find me at just Google my name.
Yes, same here. Happy to anyone that's listening, if they're wanting any discussion about the career, whether they choose it or not, happy to talk through and just discuss options.
Yeah, and I think I said everything that was important to me. So thank you for joining today. I think this was amazing conversation, and definitely open for more conversation, questions, what have you. So thank you.
Well, again, thank you. Our three speakers today is really great hearing you talking from your perspective. So to all the pathologists there, please engage with your lab staff, with your lab leadership, and be there for them. That's the only thing that I can say, and make sure that their work is recognized as it has to be. And okay, Daniela, thank you so much for hosting again. It's been super nice.
Yeah, thank you, Maka, my partner in crime, and helping to have this beautiful conversation take place. And all three of you, Nina, Sue, Max, you offered so many wonderful pearls. I personally will take back with me and try to extend them in my own professional life. And I want to thank those who listened in and added questions and thinking about this and taking the time that this is important to them. So thank you to our listeners. I wish everyone a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon. Take care.